I was drafted,
I know what you mean.
I went to Fort Sheridan.
Can I have this one too?
I got
This
there. I was there about 3 days. Then they sent me to Fort Lewis, Washington, and that's where I got my basic training in the engineers. I thought I was going into the infantry, but
I'll keep this right here.
primarily I was industrial engineering, so they decided I'd go into engineers, which was a good fortunate thing because I was lucky to be in the engineers instead of being in the infantry.
Yeah.
And I went to Fort Lewis, got my basic training, then they sent me to Virginia. From there they sent me to Africa. I was in Africa for a while, and then we got ready to go to make an invasion of Sicily. Sicily is a little island just south of Italy. We made that invasion, and when we went through the whole island, we secured that island. We went into the southern part of Italy, and I went all the way to Naples. Naples is a big city in Italy, and from there we were camped just a little bit outside of Naples, and we were building bridges, and I got hurt on the bridge. I crushed my leg. They brought me back to Naples to the hospital, a great big hospital that the Army took over from the civilians. And they got my leg back in shape. It was all crushed, and they got all the bones and the ligaments back into shape. It took me about 2 months before I got to walking again. And then I had a problem with my legs, so they put me in the motor pool. I drove a half track, and I drove that for maybe 5 or 6 months. Then they put me on a Jeep. They had me Jeep, and I was a messenger. And I got into a lot of scrapes in there.
Oh, yeah.
Every time I had to go on a mission, the officers would say, "You don't go alone. You go with a volunteer. You go ask the Sergeant Kessel for a volunteer." And he would never get me a volunteer. Every time I was supposed to go, he would be the one that would go with me. And we got in a lot of scrapes, tough ones. One time he almost got shot by our own men because
Can you do that?
we were late at night and traveling in the dark, and we were going through an area where our Army boys were guarding, and he didn't know the password for the new day. It was after midnight. He knew the old password, but he couldn't remember what the new one was. And finally, the guy stopped me, and he says, "What's the password, or else I'm going to shoot." And I knew what the password was, and I gave it to him. He let us go through.
Pussycat.
And my job was taking soundings of the river. I would decide where to build a bridge. I had equipment and a rope and a rubber 2-man rubber boat that was on top of my Jeep, and then I would go and had these instruments, and I would drop them in the water, see how fast the current was, and if it was too fast, then I would have to find a spot where to put the basic bridge parts. Well, I came down with pneumonia, with malaria in Naples. They put me in a hospital, and my buddy, Sergeant Kessel, knew my job, and he had to do the job that I was supposed to do in the rubber boat, and he got a volunteer to go with him. And when he was on that boat, a sniper shot him in the head and killed him. It would have been me if I would have been there, because I would have had to be doing that. When I got out of the hospital, I went into the see Dr. Kessel, Sergeant Kessel. I didn't know he was killed. And they didn't want to tell me about it because they knew that I was my best friend. And then one of the guys says, he was doing your job and he got killed.
And this one
I felt real bad about it.
That's better. That's better.
But that was my job. I had to do that. And I did that at a lot of rivers and decided where to build the bridges. That was our big thing, to build a bridge to get the troops across heavy equipment, you know.
So the bridge was in Naples.
This was in, just north of Naples, just a few miles out of Naples.
Oh, it's
Was it a big bridge?
Christmas tree.
Yes, I got a picture of it. It's something like 700 feet long. It was one of the longest inland bridges built. They named it after him because he was killed there. If I would have got killed, he probably would have named it after me, Kessel. He was a fella from Hamtramck, Michigan. And when I got home after the war, Mom and I went to Detroit because Hamtramck is a suburb of Detroit.
Check this out.
I wanted to see if I could find some of his family.
Your
Army.
But when we got there, I was driving down the road and a policeman stopped me and he said, I see you're from Wisconsin. He said, I want you to go back home. He says, there are going to be riots in Detroit. And he says, and you can get hurt there.
This is my
So the mom and I came back home. I didn't get to see anybody in his family. And I never did get back there. I felt bad about it. I got a nice picture of him and me on my wall.
Maybe we could find, like, you know, his son.
Well, he wasn't married. He was. Maybe some of his family is still alive. I don't know, but that's 65 years ago.
That's cute.
What year were you in? What year were you in the army until?
What year?
What year did you get out of the army at?
When did I get out? November of 1945, I got out.
And when did you go into, like, training? When did you start?
1943.
Did you just build that bridge, or did you build...
I was in the Army 3 years, so 1942 was when I got into the Army. I was in the Army 3 years, 2.5 years overseas, and a half a year in training before I went over.
Did you do anything in Africa?
Well, we just built bridges.
Just bridges?
Yeah. And then we went all the way from Africa. We made the invasion of Sicily. And then we went up to, I got as far as Naples, a little past Naples. And then they put us aboard ship, and I thought we were going to go to England because we knew that they were going to make the invasion of Europe. But they put us aboard ship and took us back to Africa because we were amphibious engineers and we knew about how to make landings. That's when I met my brother in Africa.
Oh, yeah.
There were 3 divisions that came across, and we taught them how to make invasion, how to make landings and secure the beaches. The 3rd division that came over was my brother's. And when I found out that the 91st Division was coming over, I told the lieutenant, my brother is in the 91st. He said, oh, they're just a few miles down the road, he says. So I got in the Jeep and I went down there and I saw it said 91st Division sign. And I got into this building and I rapped on the door, and a general opened the door. He wanted to know what I was going to do. what I wanted. And I told him my brother was in that division.
Keep falling.
And he said, who's your brother? And I told him.
Wow.
And he said, well, he isn't here right now. He says, he's on a troop ship taking airplane parts to Italy, to the southern part of Italy. And he'll be back in a short time, in a couple of days. So a couple of days later, I went there and I met my brother. Can you imagine? I met my brother 4,000 miles from home, and I met my brother.
Like that, okay.
6 months later, he was killed.
I'm finding one more. I'm in Mexico.
In Africa?
Put it on there.
No, he was killed in
What is
Italy.
that thing that's on there?
Yeah, he was killed in Italy. I felt real bad about it because him and I had plans. At that time, we had plans of what we were going to do when we get back home.
What did you want to do?
We were going to go into automobile business. He was a mechanic, see, a very good mechanic. He was very good. And I told him, I said, I don't know too much about mechanics. And I knew he was good because he went to school, voice tech, and he learned about automatic. And that was his job, fixing the Army tanks. He would, if they were having problems, he would work on the engines and everything, put them back in shape. He was very good. He was a very good mechanic.
What was his name?
Norbert.
Oh yeah, Norbert.
Yeah.
I need one more.
I missed him. He was 3 years younger than me. And he got him and I, when I went to France, he was still in Italy, and I'd write to him, and he would write to me. Then all of a sudden, his letters were coming back and says, deceased, deceased, and I couldn't believe it. They would return the letters to me deceased, and then my mother sent me a letter saying that she got a notice from the government that he was killed.
They didn't come to the door back then? They didn't come to the door back then? They just sent you a letter?
No, he was killed in Italy, so I never got to see him after that.
Yeah.
And then, after the war, when I got home, he was buried in Italy in the Army graveyard. The Army had, I've seen a lot of those, where all the white crosses were Army. And my mother made a request to bring his body back home. So she brought us, and I thought, well, he's in a good place. I tried to talk her out of it, and she wanted him back, and I could see why she wanted his body back. But she's buried at the cemetery out here. So I go visit him once in a while. I put some flowers there.
Look at this big line.
So, when did you you were at Dachau, right?
Yes.
So
As a matter of fact, our group was one of the first ones there. When we were heading from Munich. There was a big town in Germany, and Munich was maybe 20 miles south of Dachau. And we stopped on the highway, and I saw this great big building, big fence, a high fence about 20 foot high, was solid fence, all out of wood. And I saw two people jump on somebody, and they were beating them up. So me and another guy ran out. We pulled these two guys off, and they were two Polish refugees that were in that camp. And that guy that was on the bottom, they were trying to kill him. He was a guard, and he was mistreating these. And it happened to be Dachau, where all the prisoners were. Most of the people were Czechoslovakians and Polish people that the Germans brought there, and they used them for building bombs and stuff like that. And these guards would mistreat them. and they were scratching his eyes that they were trying to get us knocking him out. But we stopped that, and then when we stopped the guys hurting this guard, I walked over to the fence and I opened up the gates, this big gate, two big gates, and in front of me was a boxcar, what they call a 40 and 8. In the war, was a small boxcar. You know what a boxcar is?
Like a Schindler's List.
It would hold 40 people or 8 horses. They call them a 40 and 8 during the First World War. And when I opened the gates, that thing was right there, and the doors were open, and all I saw was bodies. Naked bodies all laying there. On both sides, and there was just a little passageway in the middle, and in the middle was a bag, a 100-pound bag of raw potatoes was slit open, and anybody that was still alive in that train could eat the raw potato. And I saw some bodies with jerk. They were dying.
Yeah.
They were all starved, skinny necks, all just skin and bones.
So after the war, no one they didn't know yet, did they? That the war was over, or they just got the news when you came, right?
Yeah. Nobody knew about that they had camps like that. None of us did until we got to Dachau. And we saw that, and then we went under. And later on we found out that they had more camps like that. They had a bigger one in Poland, where all the Polish people were in. And the smell was so terrible. I couldn't eat for 2 weeks after that. My stomach was so upset.
You were doing this right for you.
Grandma's yarn. She necklace.
Hey, Grandma did it to you, and I.
So the guards didn't know. The guards were still there, or did they run away?
Well, most of them were gone, but that one was laying there. He was pretty well beat up. And I didn't blame. After I saw what that was, he was a German guard.
Yeah, right.
And then I didn't know that until these guys stopped eating them.
He found his glasses. Good.
Don't break it.
And
Who are you?
they
Who are
some of the guards were trying to get rid of some of the bodies and the burning and
They were burning bodies in there.
Did you see Schindler's List?
We didn't stay that long, but some of our guys from other companies, they were there to take care of that. But we were the first ones. I was in the 3rd Battalion, and we were the first ones there. But we had to go to Munich. That was the town that we wanted to take because that was a big town, and that's where the Germans produced a lot of their stuff for the war. And my job and 2 other guys, Emerson Mead, my friend Emerson Mead, and Art Sisson and myself, were put into a building. I got a picture somewhere of it, and it happened to be the headquarters of Nazi headquarters, national headquarters of the Nazis. And we had to go in there and guard that stuff, all that information that was in there. Files and files of people that belonged to the Nazi Party. They used that during the trials after the war, and that was our job to keep it there. And there was a room there, like a pantry room with shelves in there, rolls and rolls of film in round cans, you know, movie picture cameras. I opened up some and I kept looking at them, and it was all about the Nazis, what they were doing.
That was really important business you were guarding. Weren't you afraid they were going to come and attack you while you were guarding the stuff? Because that was like, I mean, they went to trial, that information. Or it was already over.
there was some guards out there, but the people next door, there was a baker shop next door, and those guys were trying to steal something. We didn't know that while we were in this building. But when we heard the noise, these people that owned the baker, all the people were on top of this two guys that were trying to steal stuff from them. And then when we got there, we stopped them, and then when the military police came, they took them away.
So they were trying to steal some of the Nazi memorabilia, kind of, that you guys were protecting. So you seen all this weird Nazi stuff lying around? Because that'd be like the headquarters. That's like...
That was the headquarters, yeah.
I mean,
they use them in the Nuremberg trials. They use all that information that my buddy and I saved. They use them. They use that in the Nuremberg trials. Well, after the war was over with, a lot of these officials were on trial. And some of them got life sentences.
Turn them around.
Some of them were put to death. And they got that information that we had.
When you went to Dachau, what were the prisoners saying to you? Were you just telling them to go, you're free?
Well, see, we had to keep going. When we opened that
You just
door,
stopped by and we're like, okay, we're here. You're the first ones to be like, hi, we're here.
we were the first ones there. I opened that door and I saw them dead bodies. I couldn't stand it. That smell was so terrible. I couldn't eat for a couple of weeks there. My stomach was so... I inhaled too much of that.
That wasting smell. Did you ever see the movie Schindler's List? The movie?
Not really. Oh, I think I did, but they weren't as vivid as what I saw, you know.
Right.
There's more down there. I didn't know you had this more. Before Mom said.
Oh,
And
gosh.
I was in the third battalion. The first battalion of the 40th Engineers, when they came down after us, they were the ones that had to do all the work there.
The cleanup.
They buried all the dead people there, because that's where they were burning these bodies, you know.
Right.
And they had to do that. Oh, that must have been bad.
So what was the name of your battalion? What was the whole title?
I was with the 40th Engineers.
Oh yeah.
40th.
That's what Grandma made, that crap ball. A cat ball.
Yeah, 40th.
And what year
3rd
was it?
Battalion,
What?
Company I.
The 3rd Battalion, Company I.
Company I.
Okay.
The 3rd, A, B, and C was the 1st Battalion. D, E, and F was the 2nd Battalion. G, H, and I were the 3rd Battalion.
Okay.
And I was in the 3rd Battalion I Company. 2nd Battalion. The 2nd before, because October 19... November 1945, I was home by then.